after Randy's gone, I'll tell him the truth.
All right, so we would be picking up on page 18 what we've been in the middle of a study is Matthew 24. Just to kind of fast forward and catch up a little bit, we have been discovering and looking at prophetical scriptures. Jonathan, we've been discussing what I kind of coined and looked at as past, present, and future. First, we looked at the past prophecies from Isaiah, this was months ago, and looked at prophecies that were made of the coming of Yeshua and the Messiah. And then we looked at some present-day stuff, which was a combination of Jeremiah and Hebrews that talks about God's Torah being written in our hearts, because this is still present-day activity that we're living out. And then we were talking about future, because with the war going on in Israel and with everything else going on, a lot of people are looking at end times ideology, and people are out there making as much money as they can again, giving seminars and teachings and books and everything else about end times prophecies. And so from a perspective of what should I be doing and what should my behavior be like, we are looking at Matthew 24 and all of Yeshua's language towards the upcoming end time, so to speak. Mm. And sometimes I do get caught on little rabbit trails and run off, talking about other things periodically. I'm trying to learn better to stay on task and stay on target with the particular subject matter or the theme. But sometimes I come across things that just seem like they lend themselves much more to things that we can understand better about ourselves and how we define our character, how we refine ourselves to be better for those around us. On the top of page 18, we were starting off with verse 29. It says, "But immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from the sky. And the powers of the heavens will be shaken, and then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in the sky, and then all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of the sky with power and great glory." We're going to talk about the sign of the Son of Man, potentially, or what it might be here in a moment. But take note that it says immediately after the tribulation of those days.
Well, we can't be in the 1,000 years then.
And then after a bunch of other words, it says, "And then they will see the sky open and the Son of Man coming." So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about post or pre-trib ideology, but this makes it pretty clear that we can expect a level of tribulation. And another theme that we've had and we've been discussing throughout this whole time is that, as Yeshua even says, well, I don't think we read it here, but we're about to in the next section, that this generation, meaning the people that were there, would not pass away until they had seen those things. There are phases of end times activities. Now, there is like a final end time, if you will, right, where God's wrath might be poured out upon an indignation. But there are multiple times throughout history where travail and tribulation take place. If you are living either as a Palestinian or an Israeli in the war zone right now, you are in the middle of tribulation.
But it's not capital T.
If you will, if you prefer that. But either way, the point is just simply somebody who is in the middle of that and has been in our past history is in the middle of it. So the point of this study really is about what should our attitude be like? How do we continue to refine ourselves as we see ourselves or see others, our neighbors, going through these kinds of times, Oftentimes people get very excited, and this is what I want to keep us from doing, is getting very excited about what signs might be and what they might represent and what the beast is coming out of the sea. Like to get lost in all of that conversation, I think, doesn't do as much diligence as trying to refine yourself to, if you find yourself in the middle of those events and other people and they're trying to understand them, how you talk to them and how you treat them is going to make more of a difference in whether or not you have an understanding of what happened. Right? Go ahead, Dave.
You were quoting out somewhat out of Revelation, and let me ask your basic belief on that. I see that as John's attempt to communicate directly with the Christians of his time, and what all this stuff is about was the various emperors. It matches up perfectly with the emperor system that they had. And they were being persecuted, bad. And he wanted to hold in there. And they got the message from it through that letter. Because if he could accuse the emperor of anything, the emperor said, we're not gonna leave you on the island of Patmos, we're gonna kill you. Now, does that make any sense?
It does.
Have you heard that? Or studied that?
I definitely know a lot of the components of what you talked about are true. There was coded into a lot of the letters of different people, and there were unseen and unwritten conversations that they would have had about even Pontius Pilate or any other emperor or any other Caesar, and there would have been a rule of rebellion discussed among the people, but never written down, right? Because clearly they would have been put to death or there would have been issues. But the revelation is also literally a vision, a revelation from God, a vision given to him. And I think that, as you know, as we talk about this all the time, since it is not encompassed within time, I think that John was also just trying to write down what he had been given in part. And although it was, this is how God works, although it was good for his time, it was also good for past times and good for future.
I was saying that it was these people being persecuted, they were being fed to the dogs, literally.
Mm-hmm.
And he wanted them to hold in there, that these people, these seven...
There were 7 literal churches.
There were
Yeah.
7 emperors over Rome. And there was even 3 other minor people involved in that. And that's 7 and 3 was the key things in this, in numerical numbers. And it was just a message to the Christians around him. So he had to send a message that it wouldn't get him strung up on a cross. And he didn't get hung up because that message, Romans said, look at what he's talking about. We don't understand it either. And so they didn't pay any attention to him, but his people knew he was telling them to hang in there. Persist. Don't lose your faith.
So that is definitely a big component of it. Again, how we treat one another and how we encourage one another during those times of tribulation is what's going to make a difference.
Yeah, we can superimpose it on our time and come up with very good stories of what we should be doing, and they're good.
That's what he wants us to do, is hang in there.
Yeah.
That's what he wants us to do.
So the sign of the Son of Man.
Uh-huh.
The scripture uses some language that in both Daniel, as you notice up above in the scripture, I put in bold letters the prophecy of Daniel, because that's what's being referred to here in this passage. The listeners of Yeshua at that time would have clearly understood this is what had been read before and talked about from the synagogue, from the book of Daniel, and they would have known he was referencing himself as this Son of Man that would come. But if you go back, as we will here shortly, and read some of the passages in Daniel, you'll find that what is described as the sign of the Son of Man is not always necessarily the supernatural signs that I think we could tend to look for. Like, we would easily think that the best thing for us to do is looking for skies that are splitting open, looking for lightning, or looking for trumpet blasts, or looking for a herald of angels coming in front. And not to imply that those things may not happen, or may not happen, but the inference that I really want to make is, what is the real sign of his coming? Because truly in our lives today, we should be able to say that he's come into our lives, that he's already arrived, right? That we already have a relationship with him.
Yeah.
So what is the real sign of his having arrived and being on sight? Daniel 7, verses 13 to 14 says, I kept looking in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven, one like a son of man was coming. And he came up to the Ancient of Days and was presented before him, and to him was given dominion, glory, and a kingdom, that all the peoples, nations, and men of every language might serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion, which will not pass away, and his kingdom is one which is not destroyed. A sign of his presence is rule and authority. If all we're looking for is to rule and have authority over ourselves while we look for the heavens to be split open, and we look for the lightning to come in the flash, and we don't submit ourselves or look to serve in every action that we have, then we really do nothing other to separate ourselves from the rest of the nations who rule and govern and have authority over themselves and are just living life when he arrives, right? So having the knowledge that he may come does not make us necessarily